Welcome to Pencil vs. Pixel. My name is Caesar, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by Sean McCabe of SeanWest.com. Hey, Sean, welcome to the show.
Hey, Caesar, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Sean is a letterer, designer, and host of the Sean West podcast, where he talks about creativity and business. We'll dive a little deeper into that in a bit, but before we do that, Sean, I'm going to ask you what I ask all of my guests: pencil or pixel? I'm really excited about your answer, by the way. Pencil or pixel?
I'm guessing you might have an inkling as to my answer, but before I decide, I'm gonna need to see what I want to pick here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with pencil. Actually, more specifically, a lead holder is what I switched to in a recent year.
Nice.
So previously, I used to use just a regular 2B pencil, and that's why I always tell people, your tools aren't the biggest thing. It's about the practice and doing the work. And I used a regular 2B pencil for 3 years, the first 3 years that I was doing lettering. And more recently, I switched to the lead holder because you can get just such a fine point with it, and it's good for detail. So, I mean, that's kind of helped me take my work to the next level, but not necessarily something I'd say you have to start out with. But anyway, of course, for me, it would be pencil. I love using, pens, pencils, anything that's real and tangible. But that's not to say I don't appreciate the pixels, because my background is in web design. I like, doing illustrations in vector and that kind of thing, but got to go with pencil for this one.
Love it, man. Love it, love it. So, Sean, before we dive into the show, let's get to know you a little bit better. What's your story?
In high school, I started a computer repair business, and I ended up joining a band, and that went full time. So we did that for a little while, but eventually we're calling it full time, but it was no longer really full time work, and so we needed something that would supplement our income. And I had this computer repair business that I was doing. And that was going really well for a few years. That was my day job, working, I guess, equivalent to full-time hours, but made my own hours. And eventually had to step down from the band, ended up getting married and was just busy with business, and, was kind of slowing down with the gigs and stuff. So stepped down from the band. And what I wasn't expecting was really feeling that creative void, because as much as I love math and logic and the technical side of things, I'm really creative. So, I play guitar and I play piano, and I need that creative outlet. And I didn't really realize it as much until I stepped down from the band. And so as a way of exploring that, while I was doing the computer repair, I spent my nights and weekends learning design, practicing design, and eventually taking on freelance clients with design. And so the freelance work ended up getting so busy that I was having to turn down work, but I was really enjoying it. And it wasn't that the computer repair wasn't going well, because it was, but I was just really stoked about design. And so I took the opportunity to take that to the next level. And what that looked like for me was I was going to need some help. I was going to need to take this more seriously. And so I called up a buddy who was a developer. At the time when I was doing freelance web design, I was doing the design and the coding and all of that, but I was more wanting to specialize in user interface and branding and that kind of thing. So I called up a developer and asked him if he was interested in starting a web firm with me, and he was. So we started a web firm together. I ended up contracting out the computer repair work. So kind of ran that business behind the scenes, but went with the web design full time. So condensing the story down, we ended up doing that for about 3 years. And during that time, I started getting into lettering and typography. And I have to credit, if I could bring it down to one point, it was meeting Kyle Steed. And if you don't know Kyle Steed, he's an illustrator from Dallas, Texas. And he came down to San Antonio. This was back in the early days of Dribbble. And he just literally looked up people in Dribbble that were in San Antonio because he was visiting. And at the time, I was the only one. And he just contacted me. I mean, it's the craziest thing. He just contacted me and said, hey, you want to meet up? And we'd never met before. I was like, wow, of course I do. And so we met at a local coffee shop, and he just poured out his passion for illustration and lettering, and it was really contagious. And I had a desire for lettering, but I didn't really know it. Like growing up, middle school and earlier, I was always drawing letters. So like I got good grades in school, but you look at my homework and it was like a work of art. Like I spent more time writing lesson 32 instead of actually doing the lesson. But I thought it was kind of weird because I didn't know there was such thing as typography. It was just any of my artistic friends were drawing still life and illustrating or painting, and here I am drawing letters, and I just thought I was kind of weird. Well, Kyle kind of made me realize I could actually go after this lettering thing and just do that, And it wasn't even like I think I could make a living out of this. It was just, hey, I could actually just work on this and enjoy it. Like I don't have to worry about whether this can be a thing or not. So, I'm running the web firm, doing full time, like maybe 8 or 10 hours a day. But in my nights and weekends, I started practicing my lettering. And I mean that literally that's what I was doing, like 6 to 8 hours a day outside my day job was lettering. I wasn't like going out and doing stuff, wasn't going to parties, wasn't reading books, wasn't watching movies, I was just doing lettering because I was just having a blast at it. And over time, during that 3 years that I was at the web firm, that lettering stuff started to it started to attract people, both people that were interested in seeing my designs on products like T-shirts or prints, as well as potential clients that wanted to commission me for work that would be, for their own project. And so what I did was I took on those commission clients during my free time. So instead of just creating self-initiated projects, I used that spare time in my nights and weekends to work on the client work. And since I had a full-time web job, I saved all of that money from the client work. And then I put that into my initial runs for T-shirts and prints, because I was then able to afford the larger runs that cost more. And so it kind of started going back and forth, between client work and products that way. And it got to the point where in the web firm, we hit a slow season. And at that time, my partner, he needed to find something else that would help him pay bills. And he ended up taking another job, and we hibernated the web firm. But I took that opportunity to take the lettering stuff full time. So that was in 2012. So wow. I guess we're going on a couple years here now that I've been doing the lettering thing full time. But more recently, in 2013, last year, I actually phased out of client work. So I was doing a bunch of client work, and I kind of got to the point where I don't know. It's not necessarily that I was getting burnout. I guess a little bit, but just getting really, I don't know. It was a combination of getting burnout with the client work and also just really excited to work on some of my own stuff. Like I had some really great ideas and I wanted to pursue them. And should I let you ask a question, or should I just keep going?
You can keep going, Sean.
Because I'm feeling this.
This is awesome. Keep it up. It's good.
All right. So yeah, I was doing all this stuff, and eventually I'm like honing it down. So at first for the client work, I was just taking on whatever I could get, tattoo commissions, wedding invitations, original artwork, logo design, all of that stuff. And I started to realize I was enjoying the branding work most, specifically custom type logos. And so I started disallowing the other options on my contact form. I just said, sorry, not taking that on anymore. So it was only the logos, but I think I was getting burnout on the logos because I was putting so much into them. At first I was doing like 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, then 4 weeks, and I was just putting so much into them, but not really feeling like I was getting compensated for it. And so I decided I needed to raise my price. And when I had stepped down, when I had left the web firm, when we hibernated it, I went ahead and ran with the same rate we were charging when I was under the firm. So, it's no longer being split, which means I'm kind of effectively doubling my rate, but that still wasn't feeling like it was enough. And so I decided, all right, I think I want to raise my rate about like 33%. So like at a third. But I was still hesitant. And so I actually ended up going to a Dribble meetup in Austin. And I met Trent Walton there, or I had met him before, but I was talking to him this particular time. And he just said, you need to double your rates. And I was like, oh, wow. Can I really do that? Like, do I want to do that? He's like, yeah, man, you need it. Your work's good. You just need to double your rates. And I thought, well, worst case, if I double my rates and the clients no longer want to hire me, I have all these projects I want to work on, all these products I want to build. Worst case, I have more time to do that. So I'm going to be excited anyway. So I might as well make these client projects worth my while. And so I decided I was going to double the amount that I was previously going to increase to. So that extra 33%, I doubled that and ran with that. And you know, first few clients that contacted me, I let them know that that's what it was. And the good news was even though they couldn't do it, they were respectful. It wasn't like, what are you trying to do, getting away with all this money? It's like they recognized that I was worth that and that I was giving them that much value. And it was really respectful. It was like, well, maybe we can work on our budget and get back to you once we have the resources and that kind of thing. But actually, sooner than later, within just about 3 projects, potential clients or so, I got a client that went with that rate. And it was great. And you know what's even funnier is I found out later on through someone who happened to be connected with someone else that was at that company that I was actually on the low end of what they were expecting.
Man.
Yeah. So, I mean, that goes to show you think like, well, I can't raise my rates. No one's going to pay that.
Yeah.
But all it's going to do, if you have the capabilities and the expertise, all raising your rate is going to do is put you into a new bracket. Because there's people that won't even consider you if your rate is so low, even if you're good. And I mean, with the web firm, we got a quote request from a very large school for a particular mobile site in one of their departments. And our bid for them was well into the 5 figures, but it was many factors less than the other bids that they got. And it wasn't even that we didn't have the competence or the expertise. It was just that we weren't even in the ballpark for them to seriously consider us. And so, yeah, just raising my rates was huge for me. And so when I eventually phased out of client work, I decided, well, I've got all these jobs in my inbox. And I don't want to just say no to these just because I have these products I want to build. Like, it's just money sitting on the table. And so I decided, well, I'll double my rates again. What's the worst that could happen, right? So, okay, full disclosure, I never got a job at that doubled rate. But again, they were respectful. So I think it was really only a matter of time.
You know, Sean, back in the early days when you started lettering, did you already showcase your work? Is that how people found you and found your work?
I was posting on my own website and then just places like Dribble or Instagram. And it was mostly just the curation of what I was posting. So a common problem I see is a lot of designers are multi-talented and they want to put out everything that they're working on. But the thing is, you put out a user interface design, you put out a logo, you put out an illustration and then an icon, and maybe I want to work on a lettering piece, and it's just kind of this random conglomerate of work. Well, if you think of following or subscribing in any sense, what do you subscribe to? You subscribe to things that are going to provide you something consistently that you know what you're going to get, like a magazine. You subscribe to a magazine, you want to get an issue every month. You subscribe to your internet service provider because you want internet. If they all of a sudden said, well, hey, this month we're going to give you TV, you're like, well, that's not what I signed up for.
Or a magazine.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's the same sense when it comes to your portfolios online. People are following you because they want to see more of a certain thing. It's a form of subscription. And so if you can meet that expectation, you're going to exponentially build your following. And I think the hardest part is for those of us that are multi-talented, it's really hard because we feel like we don't have an outlet for that. But it's good to keep in mind that just because you curate what you share doesn't mean that you can't be talented at these other things. It doesn't mean you can't do them. But the biggest change in my, just for example, my Dribble exposure was changing the type of stuff that I was putting up there. I mean, I do user interface design, I do animation, I do illustration, I can do icons, all that stuff. But it was when I specifically changed what I was posting there that I noticed a very distinct difference. And it was like just a clear inflection point.
Let's talk about your branding. So you chose the name Sean West. I'm curious, where did the name come from?
It's a mashup of my first and middle name. So Sean Wesley, just shortened it to Sean West.
Very cool. Man, I love it. Like everything you've just pointed out, everything you said is exactly the type of things that you talk about in your podcast. You talk about creativity, you talk about business. You also talk a lot about positioning yourself. So narrowing down what you are going to provide to the masses. That's excellent stuff you just talked about. Now, you were saying that you got into client work and you were at a point where you sort of just you didn't really want to continue doing that. You wanted to explore other avenues. Is that when you decided to begin, for example, the podcast and now even more recently, the community?
Yeah, so
let's talk about the community. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll back up a little bit and I'll get to it. I really wanted to put more out there that would help people get into lettering and really refine their lettering and take it to the next level, because I see that lettering is getting bigger. It's starting to explode a little bit. A lot of people are getting into it, but there's kind of this ceiling that people hit. And for me, it was really difficult trying to find resources and materials that could help me really refine my lettering. I had to scour the internet and find all of these things in different places and kind of bring them together and figure things out on my own. And I wanted to help people by providing something that was everything that I had learned all together in well-articulated form. And that's what Learn Lettering is. That's where that was born. So Learn Lettering is a series of courses, video courses and lessons with articles and resources that I'm going to be launching in March. And so I originally just had a tutorial page up, and it just gave this kind of broken down steps, like how I design a piece of lettering, a quote for something. And over the course of about a year or a little less than a year, I think over 200,000 people had viewed just that single tutorial page. And so I realized there's obviously interest there. And the reason I made it at first is because I'd post up lettering pieces and people would say, how do you get into this? What's the first place to start? And so I just made this tutorial page. And I realized there's much more need for in-depth education on that. And so this was a couple of years ago that I'm kind of envisioning this and formulating the idea for it, but I was still really deep in client work. So I didn't have the capacity to work on it. And that's kind of what I wanted to go towards. And Skillshare actually approached me and wanted me to teach a class. And so I figured that would be a good way to get my feet wet, kind of feel out the formula. And that actually went really well. So when I phased out of client work, that was kind of the first thing that I did. And that actually did really well. I mean, within a month or two, it was in the 5 figures of sales after their cut. So that was a really good sign that okay, this is something I can really get into. And so I phased out of client work, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm gonna really focus in on this. And I don't know, I have a problem of filling my time, and not with wasteful things, but productive things. They just kind of they detract from my focus. So I ended up taking on a book illustration project, which spanned about 7 months. I just finished it last month. And then I did the Skillshare class. And then, brilliant idea, I decided to start a podcast in August. Not just a podcast, not just a monthly podcast, not just a weekly podcast, a twice a week podcast. I just like to, I don't know, punish myself or something. So I start the podcast. Basically, I had all of these things that I wanted to share, especially on professionalism in terms of designing and working with clients and that kind of thing. And I was kind of waiting until I got out of client work to start talking on that because I felt like I could be more objective that way. And I wouldn't be worrying about, talking about clients and also worrying about dealing with clients. Like I wanted to really be objective. I wanted to be outside of it. So once I phased out of client work, I decided the podcast was a good thing to get into. So all the while, past 6 months or so, I've been working on the Learn Lettering courses. And in the meantime, where the community comes in is my podcast isn't sponsored, and that's an intentional choice. And it's because I don't have ads on my website. I could very easily monetize the page views that I get. I don't have sponsors on the back of my shirts that I design. Nothing about my brand has advertisements like that. So I didn't want to do it with my podcast, even though you kind of get that sense. It's like, well, if you podcast, you take on sponsors. That's what you do. Every podcast you listen to has sponsors. And I didn't want to do it that way. And I don't know, maybe I'm just unconventional or whatever, but I really believe that if I'm outpouring value and helping people, that's going to come back. And so as a way of allowing people to help support what I do, I didn't want to just say, you can donate, you can give me money or whatever. I wanted to continue to provide value. So what the community is the design industry is just rampant with unprofessionalism. And so the things that I talk about and teach in my podcast are trying to help people come out of that. And I think it's really hard to find people that are able to help you grow in your professionalism and help you get to that next level and get out of the technician mindset where you just crank out the work and you do as you're told, and contrast that with we are professionals, we're providing solutions, and we're helping clients create value. And so the community is a place where there is mentorship for that kind of a mindset. And there are like-minded individuals who think that way. And so you can be around that type of community and foster that. And we also have the live stream for the podcast and the chat and discussion forums. And I have a weekly video show that I do there as well. So I'm trying to kind of just outpour the value and also build up for myself, just clear transparency. Obviously, I want to build up my own residual income. So I have physical products, I have digital products, I'm working on courses, but then I also have this membership.
You just about covered all of my questions, by the way, Sean. Everything and then some.
I hope that's good.
That's great. That is great. You're just going with it. I love it. Who do you look up to? Now, I'm very interested in this because you seem to be very, very knowledgeable with business, and that's a great thing. That's something that I think a lot of designers and creative professionals, creative types out there need to know a little bit more about. The business side of things, how to do things, like how to do things. Just have you mentioned professionalism. Is there anyone you look up to that inspires you to better yourself in that? And also artistically, are there any particular artists, designers that you really look up to that, I don't know, that you aspire to be like, or that just sort of push you to the next level?
In terms of design professionalism, I would have to say Andy Rutledge was a big inspiration. Designprofessionalism.com is a treatise of his, which lays out the foundation for professionalism in the design industry. And that's really what got me into it. And he also ended up having a weekly video show where he taught this stuff. I think he had probably like 50 episodes or something. And then he eventually, he kind of just publicly resigned from it. He said, basically, I've said everything that I have to say. And I mean, he had written dozens, if not hundreds of articles over probably the past decade or so, just tons of stuff out there. And eventually he said, I've said it. It's all there. Like, this is what I have to offer. And so he kind of withdrew himself. And I am a INTJ personality type. I don't know if you're into the Myers-Briggs thing, but part of my personality is not so much that I am an inherent leader. It's more that when I observe there to be a lack of leadership, I am naturally inclined to take up that responsibility. And ironically enough, Andy was also INTJ personality. But when he stepped down, I felt like inspired by all of that. Like I was on fire for it, and so I kind of wanted to pick up where he left off and continue that because I really believe that the design industry needs professionalism. And so I kind of wanted to continue that.
Excellent. What about, are there any books in particular that you really that really help you out and that you maybe even continue to refer back to?
Great question. So in high school, when I was starting up these two businesses that I had, at which I actually ended up selling that computer repair business finally after I think 3 or 4 years of running it, but not actually working in it. So I had it for like 7 years, but I finally sold it because I just had it on the side. But when I was running these businesses, I was also pursuing a degree in computer science, but I only got about a fifth of the way through. And the reason is I recognized that in both industries that I had businesses, experience was equal to education. And so that in combination with the fact that I also realized that I always wanted to work for myself and I didn't ever see myself working for anyone else, I realized I didn't really need to continue pursuing the formal education. But that's not to say that my education ceased. I definitely still continued to pursue it, but it was just more on my own terms and my own self-initiative. And I guess if anything's been a big difference, it's just been podcasts and ebooks and resources that are online. I mean, all the information is out there. If you want to get into something, if you're interested in something, if you want to learn something, all the information is out there. And the vast majority of it is free. That's the crazy part. And the very, very small percentage of it that is paid is, first of all, very affordable. And second of all, it's even more thorough. Like the amount of free content out there on any subject can bring you almost to a professional level in any pursuit if you really have the determination to find it. But the stuff that is paid is really, really affordable when you compare it to, getting a college education. And so for me, I'm having trouble thinking of podcasts. I'm mostly into like marketing and business type podcasts, but I haven't bought too many books. I guess the one book that had a really big impact on me was called Influence by Robert Cialdini, I think is how you say his last name. But that was an incredible book. And what it is it's like a more psychology book, but marketers have been they've been really big on it because it kind of gets you into the mindset of the customer and how they think. And it's a really powerful book because it talks about, the rule of reciprocity, where if I buy you a coffee, you not only feel indebted to me for the value of a coffee, but you want to overcompensate that because no one wants to feel any amount of debt to someone. And so you might buy me lunch in return because that just totally clears your slate. But it talks about how marketers, at least like the more sleazy marketers, will exploit that and take advantage of that because you can give someone a gift and then kind of leverage that to get something bigger in return. But I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is the concepts and ideologies in that book are very, very powerful and can be used for good and evil. But that one definitely had a big impact on me. But I would just say, get into a niche of some sort. Like maybe it's marketing, maybe it's business, and just start looking at what other people are listening to or who those people talk about in their podcasts. They might mention someone by name, go search that name and find out what else they have and just follow that rabbit trail.
Everyone, you will find that book and links to everything that we talked about here on pencilversuspixel.com/Sean. You know what? I'm going to use this Sean West. How about that, Sean?
All right.
Like that? It'll
I
make it a
do.
little bit easier.
Yeah, that's good.
Sean, do you have any last piece of advice for designers, creatives out there, possibly even people who want to begin their own business in a creative field?
I've got 3. The first one is think of a number of adequate portfolio items and double that number. And then you're starting to get close. You do not have enough portfolio items. You need to crank out the work. You need to do it consistently. You need to just make a huge body of work. And even better, make case studies for those. And if they're for client work, show how you solved a problem. The second thing is double your rates. So when you are putting forth the effort to build up your portfolio, even when you don't have client work, you're just working at honing your skills and getting deeper into your trade and understanding the many facets of it. Just produce projects. Do self-initiated projects. As you do this, you're going to grow in your expertise and the services you offer are going to be more valuable. So double your rates. Right now, whatever your rate is, I want you to double it in your mind. And the last thing is write every day and write as the first thing you do that day. Cameron Mall says the best way to make a name for yourself is to write. And that's been huge for me, is writing. And in one of my podcasts, titled It All Starts With Writing, I talk about how virtually everything that I'm doing right now starts with writing. I mean, I have podcast outlines, I have book ideas that I want to do, I have courses that I'm going to write, I have articles and resources. Everything starts with writing, no matter what it is. And so I like to start my day with writing. And that's just been the hugest thing. I've made a point to purpose to write every day, get up early and have that be the first thing before I turn on, my email or Twitter programs and check all of those notifications and stuff. It's just early in the morning, maybe it's still dark outside. There's no distractions, nothing's on. And I'm just there with a blank page in front of me and I write. And I don't write because I wake up every morning with something to say. I write to find out what I have to say. And so that's just been a huge thing for me this year. It wasn't exactly a New Year's resolution. I started it towards the end of December, but purposefully writing every single day. Today is day 46. And something I've done is on the community forums that I have a project accountability section. And so I have a thread where every day I say what I wrote about, also when I woke up and how many words I wrote. So it's not only for me to see where I've come from and what days have produced the best work and when I woke up that day, but it also shows everyone else that's a part of the community that, these results are coming from a daily commitment to show up and to do the work. And so it keeps me accountable because I'm making a public commitment. Even though it's in a private forum, it's still a form of public commitment, which works as accountability and keeps me on the ball with that.
What's your daily the daily amount of words that what goal do you have?
My goal is 1,000. Every once in a while I'll dip below that to like 600 or 800, but usually I go up. So it's usually an average of 2, sometimes 4,000. Nice. But I try and really just like crank it out. And I would say I probably end up using about 80% of it somewhere or another. It might be for a podcast, it might be for a blog post or a newsletter. And it's not so much that I focus on the output or the use of what I wrote. I try and just write. And I usually end up finding a way to use that later. And if that's not just, all as one piece, it may be across multiple days altogether. That can be something bigger. And I'm trying to use this time to build up a habit because I have a book in mind that I want to write. And I know that I need to have this kind of momentum to be able to finish something as big as a book.
Definitely. Was it difficult at the very beginning when you started writing?
It was. It's hard to remember now because it's day 46 of being really purposeful, but I've always been writing every day. It's kind of just been something that I end up doing, and maybe it's in the middle of the day, and I'm just trying to make it be in the morning as something that's more productive. But once I started realizing the power of writing and the power of getting your voice out there, and how much it cements your own understanding in your mind, not just helps other people and teaches other people and lets them learn from you, but it cements your own understanding. Once I got a good grip on that, I'm excited about writing. And that was never something that I was interested in school. But now that I'm out in the real world and seeing the tangible results for my business from it, I'm excited to do it.
Wow, that's amazing. Sean, where can we find you? Where online can we find you? Besides SeanWest.com.
Well, from SeanWest.com, you can get to all of my other stuff.
Okay.
So if you want to follow me on Dribbble or Twitter or Instagram, it's all Sean West everywhere. So.
Well, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show today. And again, everyone, you will be able to find all links and everything we talked about here on pencilversuspixel.com. That's pencilvspixel.com/Sean West. And that's WES at the end. Sean, again, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate your time. And everyone, thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.